Happy off week, BATT Family. Welcome to another Odds and Ends episode. Today's is going to be largely focused on the conversations that we ended up cutting out from our talk with James Hudson in episode 9. If you have not listened to that episode yet, I really recommend you going and checking it out. Nothing that we talk about here is going to ruin any of that conversation, but it was still a ton of fun to talk about with him. We have a lot of stuff related to Druid City in these cut pieces. Some of that is the future of some of their games. Some of that is some hopes of what he's looking at. We are also going to be putting in our conversation about Madcala that Scott and Jason and I had discussed post-GenCon. And then we are also going to throw in a little extra nugget from our spooky season mini episode about Coma Ward. I wanted to talk about it during that episode. It didn't feel like it inherently belonged. Regardless, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week for episode 10, the top 10 thematic games, with another special guest and member of the BATT family. This first segment comes up as we were discussing Wonderland's War, and James was excited to tell us about the upcoming content for the game. We also got quite excited through the course of it.
That sounds really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to see what you've got planned for Wonderland's War, because I just can't mention it enough. In my rating system, when I do area control, it starts at a 3. The fact that you're saying you're going to have more to it, yes, and?
Would you like me to give you the high level of this expansion? Because I could do that.
If you really want to.
If people join my Discord, the Druid City Games Discord, we have open playtesting. They have to do it on TTS. So you've got to have a computer that can run TTS. But we invite people to come playtest all the games that we're making because we've learned that just makes our games a lot better. White Queen and Caterpillar are going to be our two faction expansions.
You got excited for Caterpillar. I got excited for
White Queen has these chess pieces that she uses for her soldiers that go out onto the board. You got a bishop, a knight, a king. They have some really cool abilities. The Caterpillar gives out smoke tokens because we're passing around the hookah.
Yep.
Yes.
And
okay. Sorry, not that excited.
And you've got these little menus where you can spin the smoke tokens to do little special abilities. One of the things I'm really excited about with this, so we've got the two factions, but we're also going to introduce asymmetric forge tracks. Yeah, really? So everybody currently obviously has the same forge track on their player board. Now there's going to be, I think there's either 10 or 12 of them. And what they're going to...
Is that going to be via overlays?
Yeah, it'll be an overlay that you put on top of the board. Okay. And what's cool is that each one of those kind of has a theme to it. I'm leaning into quests, or I'm leaning into battle, or I'm leaning into card play with the Wonderlandians. And so far, testing has been nothing but fun. And then one more other little drip there is, well, James, if you're bringing in the Caterpillar as a playable character, how does that work as a Wonderlandian? Well, all of the base characters from the OG is going to become Wonderlandians. They can be mixed in as well. That way, if they're not in the game, they can be a Wonderlandian that their card pops up. And you've already got their mini.
Oh, so you can pull them, if they're a playable character, you pull them out of that deck, but if you're not playing them, they slide in. That's beautiful.
How is that going to work with the deck replacement from Shards of Madness?
That is a great question. So one of the things we're trying to decide is, do we want to make multiple cards that would apply to both? But we haven't made a decision on that quite yet. Shards is its own thing. So we may not, I don't know. We haven't completely decided. That's a great question.
I really like what Shards does. In episode 7, we talked entirely about expansions and what we like in an expansion. And when I opened up Shards of Madness and I read through it and I realized how small it was, but how impactful it was, that's just a chef's kiss expansion for me.
My favorite is the Tea and Crumpets. I love starting with stuff and like, oh, cool. I'm going to try to take, the Knave of Hearts and this other stuff, and I'm going to really try to lean into that strategy. I love when games do that. So, yeah.
I still haven't had a chance to play Sorcerer City yet. I very much want to, and it's sitting on the table across from me, so it will be done soon. Scott, on the other hand, is very much in love with the game, and he was very excited to talk to James about the future of it. And frankly, James got just as into it. When he mentions another Scott partway through, he is talking about Scott Caputo, the designer of the game.
Sorcerer City might be a game. A second edition might make sense because I didn't know this, but people get freaked out by the words real time. And that's that's what hurt it, right? But you've played it. It's not a frantic running around throwing stuff craziness.
No, I'm just working in my zone. Like,
we put the timer on it because when we play tested it without a timer, there are people, some might say, have analysis paralysis. And they would take a tile and they'd spin it in their little hand 18 times and look at every possible combination on their board, and it would take them 20 minutes to play around. And we were like, nope, that's not fun for anybody else.
And that's why you put a timer in there, because it forces them to make a decision.
But the whole point of the timer, too, was not to rush them, but just be like, you can't take forever.
Have you played Bullet Heart, Bullet Star from level 99?
I have not.
So
they're fun.
It is one of my favorite games. It is one of those, I don't know how the game works because it takes a space shoot 'em up like Galaga or Ride In, that type of game, and it turns it into a board game. It's fascinating how it works. And it also does one of the things that a lot of board games that try it don't succeed in, and I don't know how it succeeds the way it does here, of there are so many different ways to play it. You can play it cooperatively, competitively, you can play it time-based. And the way the timer works in that one is you have like 3 minutes and you just need to process through your bag. And if the timer runs out and you're not out of your bag, you can no longer use special abilities. You just have to place them. And so it's one of those, the timer is there and it has some weight, but if you don't end up living within the timer, you didn't break the game. You didn't ruin anything on yourself. You may have made it a little harder. The way you're talking about it reminds me of that.
Well, you know what? Just as we were talking about this, and as we're talking about second edition. So if we ever did a second edition, say, of Sorcerer City, we could work in those expansion pieces. And just so Scott knows, the monsters become like mega monsters. They're like 6, 7 block monsters, right? And you have to build around them, right? Like it's so cool. And you get apprentices, and your apprentices level up, and they have a tech tree. So good. So good.
You just need to realize, James, that right now I'm sitting in front of my microphone. My eyes are closed, and I have a very nice smile on my face.
He actually, I can confirm this.
But
so there's so much of that game that is so good. And
it's when Scott told me it's deck building, but with tiles, not cards, and you sprinkle a little galaxy trucker in, I was like, dude, just give it to me. So if I was to do a second edition of that, knowing that people don't like real time, we could just change that around where there's no timer anymore. I literally had this idea while we're talking. And you just get a reward for being the first one finished. So you're incentivized to go quickly, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Or do like what Bullet does, and there's your timer, great. If you get done within the time, awesome. If you fail, okay, no biggie. There's just this thing they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's a way to do it, and then maybe everybody gets what they want, because that game, it's even ranked in the top 1,500 on BGG, which is, that's batting way above its weight on the ranking for how many units have sold that game.
I hope like you're writing this stuff down, or like we'll send you the audio files so that you have this, that you told me this stuff, so that you can get this to happen, sir. Because if I have to drive to Alabama to get it, I have time off coming.
Hey,
so
all you've got to do is hit up Scott Caputo. I'm sure he has prototypes he would be happy to send you, because he hits me up about every 3 or 4 months and is like, hey, what about that Sorcerer City expansion?
The note he is writing in his notebook right now has this giant circle and stars around it. Scott had a great question about game themes that took us off a course from talking about Kickstarter, but James got excited to tell us all about where everything came from, his work with Mr. Cuddington, and the possible futures of Tidal Blades and Bloodstone. To quote James, we got some world-first public information about it all. I hope you're as excited about it as we were.
About IPs and themings and stuff like that. So like you started back in 2016 with the Fun Farm game, and then shifted to Grimm's Fairy Tales. We have a magical city, we have an aquatic world, and now we're having fun with a tea party. How do you decide what your world is going to be? How did you come up with that starting IP? Alice in Wonderland, absolutely phenomenal idea. What made you land on those?
Yeah, I am surrounded by a lot of talented people. That's first, number one. Mr. Covington, David and Lena are incredible artists, writers, and world builders.
I love what they do.
I was talking to them at one point about doing some stuff for some games. Obviously, they did Grim Forest for me. And I was trying to give them another assignment. I was like, hey, I got this game. I want to do blah, 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 blah. And they're like, hey, listen, we don't want to take assignments anymore. I was like, what do you mean? Like, we want to create our own worlds. And I was like, okay, well, what you got? You know? And they said, we want to surprise you. So we're going to put some stuff together and we'll, essentially a pitch, and we'll give it to you. And what they sent me was that what ended up being the cover art for Tidal Blades 1, where Dust is standing on the dock. And as soon as I opened that file, I was like, yep, whatever you guys want to do. And I mean, we're currently working on Tidal Blades 2 is about to actually ship probably the next 2 weeks.
That's exciting.
And then we've already planned 2 expansions for that. In our world, we wanted to tell this story. We kind of look at it like a trilogy, a 3-act play, if you will. And that's kind of where we foresee the Tidal Blade narrative going and ending. Now, there might be some more spin-offs or something like that, but for the most part, that's the story that's in us to tell the world about Tidal Blades. We're moving on to new worlds. We're building new places. I don't know. It's a collaborative process, Scott, as we to really get back to your question, right? Like, what are you inspired by? What am I inspired by? What are we reading? What are we watching that's inspiring us to want to do something different? Because, you know, I don't know if we need any more zombie games right now.
To kind of tie that idea back up to our why you're on Kickstarter, Tidal Blades is a really interesting series. So you have a very American dice chucking, build your character, reset, do it all over. Then you move into Banner Festival, which sounds like it's in your offshoot pile. And that is trick taking and area control, which I love that blend. And then you are going into Tidal Blades 2, which is very heavy storytelling in a way that the other two necessarily weren't. They touched on it, but this one is significantly more in that realm. Is that one of the reasons why crowdfunding is a good option? Because you can say like, hey, we are trying something different with every time. Check us out.
Well, it's definitely part of the marketing. When you want people to invest in a story, like with their time and their energy, there's got to be a bit of a buildup, right? And that's hard to do in board gaming. And so crowdfunding campaigns stretched out over 20, 30 days is a great way to tell a little bit of a story over that time and get people hooked into the story. I try to do that with Bloodstone. I don't know if you guys saw that one back in the day.
I really want that one to come back.
Well, you're going to have some good news very soon.
Yes.
Did I just like audibly shiver?
World first.
Excitement? Yeah.
World first. But for Bloodstone, like when we launched that one, we wrote a novel. And when I say we wrote a novel, I mean we worked with an author and we wrote a full fantasy novel for Bloodstone. And so when we were doing the updates, I was just like smashing people over the head with all this lore and backstory and building the world. And they didn't care. They were like, where's my plastic minis? This is bullshark, you know? and then we ended up having to cancel. I don't know what the threshold is, but there's a certain amount of interest somebody has to have in a product before I think they're really willing to go deep down the rabbit hole of that much narrative. I think I went too hard, too heavy, too fast with the novel approach. Whereas, say, Tidal Blades and Wonderland's War have these 2 to 3 paragraph daily narratives, right? So that's a quick read, right? We're talking 5 minutes. Whereas I was really coming in with pages of narrative. I think I need to put the game in people's hands, let them fall in love with the game and the characters, and then come back with a heavier story in that scenario.
I played Banner Festival first when it came to Tidal Blades, and I remember sitting there playing it and being like, I want more of this world. I want to see more of this world. And then you guys announced the tabletop, and I really lost it because I'm like, that is going to be so freaking
I think Tidal Blades 2 is a really nice mix. It's 20 some odd scenarios to finish the whole campaign. Each scenario only has 1 page to a page and maybe like a paragraph of narrative. So it's not a super heavy read because you're probably going to play that scenario. It's going to take you about an hour to play it. So, you know, you're not reading tons and tons. And we went to Foreteller and had them do the professional voice acting and sound effects. So you didn't have to read it. You just hit the play button and listen.
And they're nice guys. Oh, they're amazing. Too. They were across from us at GenCon this year. And man, they're a party.
Yeah.
And then I think just from our perspective, we put so much time and effort into that story. I hope and feel people go through it and go, man, this ain't no generic high fantasy, right? This is a really great story. And I really can't wait till people get to the very end and see what we did at the end. Let's go.
We've talked about Betrayal Legacy on this podcast multiple times.
Yeah.
And that game stands out because what it does for you in the very first moment, and then like the zero chapter, which is still one of the greatest mind blows I've ever gone through. And then the finale, when you're reading the ending, you're like, I cannot believe they just pulled that off. So I can understand why you would want that, because when that works well, like that's the stuff that sticks in my head.
Yeah, and that's what we want to make. I mean, the whole idea was Paddle Blades should be on Netflix, and it should be a 3-season animated Netflix series. And we kind of built our story arcs with that in mind. And I hope people get to the end of this and go, oh, what's next season? What's going to happen? You know?
Yeah,
so.
That's super cool. In this segment, we were talking about the end of Tidal Blades 2, no spoilers there. And in relation to it, we were talking about the end of Betrayal Legacy. Again, no spoilers there at all. James has a very specific hope for players at the end of Tidal Blades 2 and how they get excited for it. That conversation then morphed into another one about Dungeons & Dragons, and we had to put in this episode. The full story of my character that I discuss, Indra, is a long story that I will, if not happily, I will tell you on request. Just find me at a con or wherever, and I will tell you all about him.
Going back to what we talked about earlier of Legacy, Betrayal at House in the Hill, that meta of that game blew my mind with the very last paragraph of the game.
If you've never played a Betrayal before, it's fine. You're still going to get a good experience.
Right.
But that little bit of extra, it's so memorable.
But if you've played it since the first edition, yeah. And also you're like, wait, excuse me? I don't smoke. I went and stood outside with my friends who do. I didn't smoke a cigarette, but I stood outside going, oh my God.
Doesn't it just feel so good when a game gives you that experience? Oh, it's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's so good. It is so good.
Yeah. But that's one of the joys of this hobby, right? Is we are able to get that. And unlike something like a video game where, yeah, I mean, I spent 150 hours inside of Cyberpunk and I love it and it's deep memories for me now. That was an experience I had. Whereas board gaming is, Scott and I now have this as a joint memory.
We played one game of Madcala and we've talked about it how many times on this podcast?
Yeah.
Like 3? And that's the thing that as much as I love video games as well, don't do, and board games too.
And Dungeons & Dragons, right? D&D does that.
So yes, my other beast of burden is I have a D&D Twitch channel.
Oh yeah.
We just started year 3 on the channel. So like, whoo, we've been really going at this. So.
Oh yeah, they're fundamental memories. If I had a house built out of all that, like, I don't know, a quarter of the bricks are role-playing in some way.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I mean, D&D is one of the reasons why I'm in the board gaming hobby.
Nice. I'm the opposite. I'm just in my first campaign. We're doing Curse of Strahd.
Oh,
so much fun.
I have not gotten a chance to do a Curse of Strahd. I'm typically a homebrew boy, but I think we might be doing Curse of Strahd on the channel. I don't know yet, but it might be happening.
Strahd is so much fun. Ravenloft in general is just so much fun.
Oh, I love Ravenloft. I mean, roleplay is one of the reasons that helped develop me as a person, so that allows me to be this type of person as a board gamer.
It's weird. The role-playing also, like, it gives you memories. And board games do this too, just like you're talking about with Madcala, right? It's like it really happened.
We have a thing that we do in between our episodes where it's the games that made us. And when I talk about D&D is that you don't talk about that my character did this and my character's group did this. It's we. You own the actions that you and your friends do in this game as though it had happened in real life. And my gaming group, we are so very tight. It's insane.
I have been a DM since 2002. I have played 3 characters because I'm always the DM. There was a campaign that I was part of around 2018, 2019. And when I got to play this character, we were playing in Elemental Evil. And let's put it this way. I spent 4 hours on just my name because the character as he was, all the things, like it all made sense. There was a reason I spent that much time. And the way that campaign ended, I can get put back into his emotional state because every time I was trying to do something, if it didn't matter if it's just, hey, I'm going to shoot this guy and we're in combat, or I'm going to go run up a wall, doesn't matter. I did it, no issue. But any time that I tried to save somebody, or I needed to stop somebody, or anything meaningful, he failed every time. It was brutal. To the point where when that campaign ended, my character had attempted to stop somebody from running out of a tower and alerting a whole bunch of people, and he got killed.
Oh.
And we come back into the next session, and the very long story short is he got brought back to life.
Wow.
Which broke him because he couldn't even die properly. I'm sitting here covered in goosebumps because that session was one of the most emotional moments I have had. And it was clearly me funneling where I was at in life at that point and the way I was feeling about my career and everything else. That was brutal. So this next segment was from our GenCon review conversation. We still need to release the full contents of that. Editing on it has been not as big of a priority because of everything else, but there's still a lot of fun conversation in there. Because of that, this segment may seem like it's coming in midstream. I tried my best to make sure that didn't happen, but just understand that we are in the middle of another conversation when this picks up. I am still just as excited for this game as I come off in this clip. It is such a cool game. As a reminder, Madcala is coming out on Kickstarter on October 22nd, and the link for that will be in our episode notes. So we are finishing up from there. We're heading up to go see James Hudson from Druid City because I'm looking at an email pre-GenCon. It's like I'm gonna be doing some stuff with some content creators, but otherwise try to find me on the convention floor. And I just fired him off an email saying, hey, we're content creators. We'd love to sit down and see Madcala. I love Alice in Wonderland, all the things. We ended up going up to the room where he was supposed to be at. And the convention guy that was there was like, oh yeah, no, we can't let you in. It's not going to be open until 12. And he just sticks his head out the door. He's like, no, they're for me. Bring him in. And so we get this cool, ridiculous, all right, look, to quote Layer Cake, everybody likes walking through a door marked private. And that was one of those moments.
We quickly did the whole oh, this is okay. It was just real quick. It was a 3-second I looked, but it felt like 30 minutes because we were like, oh, this is happening.
Yeah. And that is the first of many moments we had. And we're not going to go through them all. It was that first moment of the work we're putting in is paying off. And so we got to sit there and we got to talk to him. And we both really like Druid City anyway. And I think I caught him completely by surprise because the game I wanted to talk to him the most about was Tidal Blade's Banner Festival, which I adore. And he's like, wait a minute. That one? And
oh yeah, he literally was just wait a second, what?
Because what they are, I think, very fairly known for, and we got to try it later that evening, is Wonderland's War. And Wonderland's War is big and gorgeous and super fun. And at that point, I hadn't even played it yet. I had made a trade for it sometime last year, and it had been the one on my shelf longest to get played because you don't like area control.
No.
And frankly, I don't really like bag building. And so we went into that we really like your other stuff. And I like this theme. Madcala is Manny Tremblay art still. Mm-hmm. It is a Mancala mechanism.
Yep.
Where each player has X amount of gems on their side, and they are within that player's color. And as soon as you start playing, it is Mancala, where I'm going to drop and do my stuff. Wherever you land is going to trigger a special power. And so the special power can be anything from get extra shards, do damage, heal yourself. And it is a head-to-head dueling game. And we get to sit down this gorgeous piece of neoprene that just even in pre-production prototype stuff is phenomenal.
Pre-production.
Yeah.
That's what I'm still sitting here going, this is a pre-production piece and
you
was
could have
nice.
boxed that up and I would have walked away from it thinking I had a retail game.
Yep.
It was very, very pretty. The other super interesting layer, on top of everything being asymmetric, because that's what their games are great at doing, is as soon as your gems leave your side of the table and they go into your opponent's side, you can still trigger the abilities over there, but you are not allowed to touch those gems until they come back around
They're
you.
mine, yeah.
And then there's this one last little twist where on top of everything else you're doing, there is a giant shard on the board that doubles the effects of whatever you land on. And so now you're doing this really interesting math of, okay, I need to do this, but if I do this and I can line this up, and you can watch as the other players are developing their strategies. And now it's that great 2-player head-to-head pivot of, ooh, what is the strategy going to be? Now, I took Alice. I love Alice. You ended up taking the
Jabberwocky, yes.
And the really fascinating part about the Jabberwocky is he's never allowed to heal.
Nope.
When he should heal, he kills the opponent's shards.
Yeah, I just shoot him right off your board.
And so I'm sitting there bleeding heavily because Jabberwock is the definition of a glass cannon.
Oh, yeah.
But thankfully, I have enough power and I have enough with what I'm doing that I'm able to survive it. We get down to where we each have 3 health. You have knocked off all but 3 of my gems.
Yep.
And the last asymmetric piece is that each character has allies or special abilities based on the story.
We have Wonderlanders, which is from the Wonderland's War.
One that Alice has is the Dodo. And the Dodo, you essentially play a bluffing shell game with the opponent. To activate it, you actually have to spend a shard. So I am now down to 2 shards. And oh, by the way, one of them is on the other side of the table because I needed to refresh this guy to be able to use it again. And when you play the shell game, you are either going to do 1 damage to the opponent, 3 damage to the opponent, or 1 damage to yourself because it's the Dodo.
Yep.
It is the most Hail Mary pass I can make. And it is so fun to watch and listen to James as he's seeing everything we're playing. And he's texting Manny the whole time, telling him what we're doing, which is, again, just bonkers.
Yeah.
Scott has this massive buildup because he has killed all of my gems.
Yeah, everything that was on your side was gone. I had 6 of your gems on my side. I had
was
4
that
of
in
your...
that giant pile?
Uh-huh, because you had them from where you landed to refresh your thing. I was sitting there with ones that I was going to be able to go, here I was going to be able to hit you for 2, and I was going to turn around and be able to hit you for 4.
I had my doubler and I had 1 single left on my side.
That's all you had left.
And so I present this shell game, and the joy of it is you literally get to arrange them in your hand. It's not a put them on the table, do anything specific. Like, you do the shell game stuff. And I did it to you, and I hit you for the 3, and I killed you. And we're sitting in a largely empty room. There's some other people setting up for the events happening at 12 and everything. There is a loud cheer from me and a swear out of you, and I'm pretty sure that James dropped his phone because how did that happen?
Yeah, he loved it.
And everybody else in the room was just like, what is happening over there? Absolutely phenomenal. It was such a cool game. It is one that we got to talk to him about his plan for the Kickstarter and the production cost and how he is trying to do a pre-stretched game where it's going to be low cost, like $40-45. You're still going to get the neoprene. You're still going to get everything in there. And it's just bang, let's have a cool game. Mm-hmm. It is my favorite head-to-head 2-player game now.
Oh, yeah, by
it
far.
Is, oh, man, I had such a blast. I cannot wait for it to go to production.
I will have a copy just because I will want it to travel.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I'll be here. I'll play yours. But if I'm not playing with you, if I'm over at Jason's house and we have time, if we're not working on something, oh, yeah.
And there were
has to...
4 more characters that we didn't get to play. And
oh my gosh. I mean...
Yeah. So the extras were the Hatter himself, the Cheshire Cat, Red Queen, and White Rabbit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because White Rabbit had the time things that he actually went in a different direction. And he does what Alice does in Wonderland's War.
Because of the pocket watch.
Yes, because of his pocket watch.
The last odd and end to talk about is Coma Ward. Coma Ward is one of the games I was most hyped up for, and honestly, one of my biggest disappointments I've ever had in this hobby. But because of us talking about second editions and prime candidates for them, I just wanted to put this in here along with the rest of our conversations. There was a game a few years ago, I believe it came out in 2019, from Everything Epic Games called Coma Ward, and it tried to be the second coming of Betrayal, and it just fell apart because it didn't even have the rough, like, it's unbalanced, but it's winnable. Like, you can play it and have fun with it and not have any questions. Coma Ward was just a pile of issues, which is a real shame because it had that same idea where when an event card would be pulled, you would actually hand it to somebody else. It was in the rules of somebody else read your card, because you might run into, and this is one that we ran into, and because of Jess, she fell in love with this. She thought it was hilarious, where you ran into the ghost of an old jazz man. Gave you 3 or 4 different copies of each encounter because, you may run into the jazz man. I'm going to ignore him. Okay, then he's going to chase you across the room and hit you with a saxophone. Okay. So on the next time you run into him, I'm going to talk to him. Well, no, this is the one where he's going to hit you in the face with the saxophone because you came up to him. So it had that fun, like, how am I going to approach each encounter? But once the haunt triggered, the game literally became unwinnable. It was a total mess to the point where I don't even think the company even acknowledges the game anymore. I know I didn't see it on their banners at Gen Con this year. It's one that, man, we were just talking about this with James, that I would kill for a second edition cleaned up, really go nuts with that. Because it was very expensive. The production was shockingly not very good. The rules were a mess, but man, if they could get that game to work, I would play it again in a heartbeat. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this Odds and Ends episode. I hope you had just as fun of a time listening to it as we did recording all the various pieces of it. And like I said, come back next week for episode 10, and we will see you there, BATT Family.